All right, Alexander, we are here with Patrick Lancaster joining us for recording so that Patrick can give us an update as to what is going on in the conflict in Ukraine. Patrick, great to have you with us on this show. Before we get started, Patrick, where can people follow your work?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on again, guys. It's always great to be here. It's great that we can put out information to the world that they're not going to be able to see in many other places. As far as my work, I've been covering the war for 10 years, you know, not just this 2-year part of it, but the whole 10-year war, as you guys know. And I mainly put my workouts on my YouTube channel, Patrick Lancaster, but also now I'm working on a new platform, Substack. I really would like as many of your viewers to go and check out my in-depth dives of my reports and many other topics on Substack. So if people could go to the Substack and subscribe, they're going to get a lot more information than they would just on my YouTube channel or other social media.
All right, I have the link to Patrick's YouTube channel as well as his Substack in the description box down below and as a pinned comment as well. So, Alexander, Patrick, we have a lot to discuss with regards to what is happening in Ukraine. So let's begin.
Let us indeed begin, because there's no one better on the location to give us a sense of what is going on. And I'm going to say this, the mood in Western capitals is becoming very, very edgy and very, very nervous at the moment. And the reason it is becoming edgy and nervous is because it's now becoming clear that the front lines are moving and starting to move very, very fast. I was reading just before we started this program a report by Reuters, British news agency, which semi-official British news agency. They said that the Russians captured around 235 square kilometers of territory last week. That's just in 1 week that they advanced, that they gained as much territory as half of London, half of the area of London in 1 week, that they're advancing fast, that they're taking places like Kurachovo, that they're close to capturing Kurachovo. They're doing all of these things. And this has created enormous amount of worry and fear. And in fact, panic. I think panic is not too strong a word in Western capitals at the moment. Now, Patrick, you are closer to the situation than any of us is, certainly much closer to the situation than the people who wrote that article in Reuters were. I should say there was an article in the BBC about a week ago that spoke about the Ukrainian front lines, being at risk in a few weeks or months of collapse. What I've heard from people who've been in wars and who are on the offensive is that there is sometimes a degree of exhilaration about this. What is the situation? What is the mood amongst the soldiers, the Russian soldiers you've been seeing and meeting? I mean, are they feeling confident? Is this still very, very tough fighting? What is their mood at the present time? And can you perhaps say a little bit about whether there have been these big advances and, you know, what these advances amount to? I mean, are they cities? Are they countryside? Are they rural villages? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Alexander. So, as you say, the front is definitely moving at an expedited pace. And really, it seems like this all stems from the initial taking by Russian forces of the suburb of Avdiivka, the very stronghold, over a year ago now. And, a lot of it's being reported is that it's just all coming out of thin air right now that Trump was reelected. I don't believe in everything as a coincidence, but the fact is Russia has been making headway since they took the castle, the fortress of Avdiivka over a year ago. Constance, if not new town every week, something like that. But as we know now, it's gone from every week taking considerable amounts to every day taking new villages or new towns. And in fact, today, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that they just hours ago took control of the Kopenki village in the Kharkov region. Now, this isn't in the Donetsk or Lugansk, Kherson, Zaporozhye, or Kursk. This is the Kharkov region. And supposedly it's not a very big village, but had a population of just over 100 before the war. But the fact is that it's a strategic location on the road to different locations. So on multiple fronts, they are making headway. Russia taking more control of territory from the Ukrainian forces. If we talk about the situation in Kharkov now, the Kharkov is somewhat of a cauldron, mostly surrounded on many sides, and the Russian forces released a video day before yesterday, if not yesterday morning early, showing the Russian forces inside the center of Kharkov, and even pro-Ukrainian maps are showing Russia controlling about half of the city, including half of the center. Now, when that city falls, what is expected is many of the Russian soldiers that are able to retreat and evacuate are going to leave that cauldron. And that cauldron, which is basically like this, with Kharkov here, is going to close, as we've seen many times before. So in that area, the front line is going to be moving about 30 to 40 kilometers like that in a day when they take just that, when Russia takes just that one city. And at the edge of that cauldron where it's going to be the new front line is just next to the end of the Donetsk region. We're talking just a few kilometers. So it's going to be a huge milestone, you could say, for Russian forces in the Donetsk region or Donetsk Republic, whatever you want to call it, whoever wants to call it on whatever side. The fact is that Russia is about to take a huge chunk of territory in that region. And also, I've been going to different areas where the refugees have been evacuated and assisted to leave the frontline areas by Russian forces to get their idea of exactly what's going to happen. And unfortunately, just been getting horrible stories, like a woman who was heard a knock at her door, and soldiers identified themselves as Russian forces, and she opened the door with in happiness to see Russian forces had come, and it was a Ukrainian soldier lying, and reported by these eyewitnesses, her son was shot and she was shot. Just one of the many horrible stories of war crimes that are going on the front line, and that's by Ukrainian forces. The civilian refugees that evacuated these areas said that the Ukrainian soldiers came to their village and knew that they were holdouts waiting for Russia to come. I mean, by the fact that they stayed and didn't evacuate, the Ukrainian soldiers identified them as traitors and separatists, or terrorists as they call them, and told them, "We're here to kill you and we're going to burn your village before we leave." These are not my words. These are words of the refugees that were evacuated by Russian forces about the actions of Ukrainian forces. So, yeah, the front line's definitely moving. And yeah, I mean, at an expedited pace, like you said.
Expedited. Yeah, I mean, a story about the refugees is shocking. Can I just ask you, have you heard this report that has appeared? And it's I mean, there's no doubt that this is a genuine scandal in Ukraine. A Ukrainian, I think he's an MP, has come forward and said that large numbers of people who had left Donbass and gone to, for like central Ukraine are now returning to Donbass, to Russian-controlled areas. This is, by the way, reported by the London Times. It created something of a scandal, apparently, in Ukraine itself, and he then retracted what he said. But there are reports that other Ukrainian officials have confirmed this. Have you seen anything like that? Have you seen people coming from Ukraine back to Donbass, to places like Mariupol, and people of that kind? Because he spoke of 150,000 people returning. Just asking.
Well, I can tell you how the situation on transit is right now from one side of the front line to the other. Before Russia came in 2022, there was, and before the coronavirus situation, there were possibilities to cross the front line. Because in a lot of times the fighting was less, there was less battle, and sometimes or another, sometimes it was heavy. But fact is, a lot of times there were ways to cross. There were checkpoints opened for the civilians to go back and forth across the front line, and a lot of them did that at the time. But it was closed during the coronavirus, and of course during the heat of Russia and the real war starting 2 years ago. But right now the situation is for civilians on the Ukrainian side to get to the Russian control side. There's two ways. As I said, wait for Russia to get to them if they're in an area that's close to the front line, or take a trip around the war zone, basically, through Europe, in the things like this. So it's not so easy, but it is happening. I can tell you that. And as far as Mariupol, you mentioned, I can say that when Russia took control of Mariupol and the restoration of the area started, many people who had left Mariupol, this is a little bit of a different topic, but still kind of similar, who had left Mariupol when Ukraine maintained control of it 10 years ago, they had left and gone to the Donetsk-controlled area. They have gone back to Mariupol. So a lot of the population that was gone for 10 years has gone back from the anti-government controlled and now Russian-controlled territory. It's a pretty complicated going here and there, but yes, it is happening. I can put it like that. It
is happening. Yeah. Okay, can I ask you about something else, which is something that you've reported extensively about, and about the only Western journalist I know who has reported about it, which is about the shelling of Donetsk, which was a recurring thing right from 2014. Now, the front line has moved a long way from Donetsk. Has that shelling now finally finished? I mean, Avdiivka that you mentioned has fallen. Krasnogorovka has fallen. All of the other places nearby have fallen. The Ukrainians have been pushed back a very significant distance. They still have long-range missiles, as we know. They still have HIMARS missiles, which I believe are still within range. But has there been a cessation of the shelling of Donetsk, or at least an abatement of it?
Well, as far as the city of Donetsk, it's getting a lot better, but it hasn't stopped. It's nothing like it was when Ukraine controlled Avdiivka. The fact is that when Ukraine controlled Avdiivka and a lot of the surrounding areas, including Pesky as well, they were using these fortresses, as I called Avdiivka, as a base to just hammer Donetsk. And basically we went from the time when the center of Donetsk was just being hammered every day, every hour by Western supplied weapons, And at that time, the center of Donetsk was about 8 kilometers from the Ukrainian-controlled territory where Ukraine could launch. Now it has gotten considerably farther. I believe during the first moments of Russia taking control of Avdiivka, it went from 8 to about between 18 to 20, and I think it's pushing 25 to 30 kilometers from the front line at this point, somewhere around there, but considerably farther than it was before. So yes, there's shelling in some of the hot zones on the edge of the city, like Petrovka and other areas, but nothing like it was before. But unfortunately, homes are getting destroyed every day. People are getting injured every day. But what has really turned into almost, you could call, the new Donetsk as far as the intensity of the attacks is Gorlivka. It's one of the most populated cities in the Donetsk area, and unfortunately, I was just there a couple days ago filming a short film on the situation, and it's just horrible. We're talking over 25,000 people without electricity and water because of the attacks on the infrastructure by Ukraine, attacks on the civilian infrastructure. We're talking about in the last month and a half, there's been over 10 city buses, civilian city buses, hit by Ukrainian FPV or kamikaze drones, or these drones, Ukrainian drones fly over the city, look down with a camera, and they see in live time a civilian bus, and then some operator decides and or is told to hit that civilian bus with this kamikaze drone that is carrying explosives and explode on the top of the bus and injure or kill civilians. And it's happened over 10 times in the last month and a half. Just horrible situation. And while I was there, the very center of the city, unfortunately, I had just been there about 10 minutes before. We're going to another heavily hit area where another woman was killed. But the very center, the busiest points of the city, right across the street from the administration, the city hall, basically, and right at the door of the main bank of the city, a set of United States supplied cluster bombs were dropped from a U.S. supplied 155 millimeter artillery shell that was fired by Ukraine over the city. And 12 people were injured just in that one attack by this U.S. supplied cluster bombs. And it was just one 155 millimeter rocket that dropped these little bombs down. They're just about this big, and they come down and just spray shrapnel with the point of injuring and killing people. So just right in the busiest center intersection of the city at just before 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the lunch break.
And I think you told us just before we started the program that Gorlivka is the second biggest city in Donbass, or at least it's a major population center. So they are targeting this big population center. And there's no, tell us, is there any military logic to these attacks? Because the way you describe it, these appear to be attacks specifically against civilians. But I mean, are there many military facilities in the center of Gorlivka that, could be attacked in that way? Could be rationalized or explained in that fashion? I'm not saying it can be justified, but is there some kind of military logic behind this? Because I've never been able to see it with Donetsk. I don't know what the situation is with Gorlivka, though.
I mean, this was there's no way that they could explain away the fact of launching these cluster bombs over a city center in the rush hour, at lunch hour. I mean, this reminds me of when they launched the bigger Tochka-U cluster bomb over Center Donetsk in March of 2022. And, unfortunately, that killed dozens. This just injured a dozen because the American cluster bombs are considerably smaller. But as far getting a little off topic, as far as military forces in the city, of course, every city in a war zone has some soldiers going back and forth here or there. But in this area that this cluster bomb hit, no, it's just the main street, literally the main thoroughfare of the city. And we saw this done so many times in Donetsk, killing so many. I mean, it just horrible. I mean, in hitting these civilian buses, it's got to the point where they've had to put some anti-drone countermeasure on the city buses, just to try to help with jamming some of these drones that come in. Bus drivers are said to be driving with detectors to try to have some sort of warning about these incoming drones that are targeting city buses. I mean, it's just, and at the same time, the only reason that I wasn't at that center intersection because I went to another location towards the edge of the city where a woman was killed making tea in her kitchen when a shell hit just outside her door in her garden, and she had a piece of shrapnel go right through her brain. And there was no civilians, or there was no military there either. I mean, all this is, these aren't, things that I'm coming up with. All this will be able to be seen fully on my film that should be out later this week on Gorlivka, City Under Siege. And they've been targeting the water infrastructure. It was a bit farther towards the front. We weren't able to get there, but there's a huge geyser, you could say, of just water spraying out that just being wasted, not getting to the people. Like I said, over 25,000 without electricity, which changes every day because they fix some things one day and another day things in another place these substations get destroyed. The substations are getting targeted. So yeah, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about Ukraine targeting civilian infrastructure, using civilians as a weapon of war. And I asked the civilians, why is Ukraine doing this? They say because Ukraine wants to kill us. Ukraine doesn't want us here. They want us to leave so they can take this area, but it's our area, their land. That's what they say. And these are people that had Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, even that rationale is collapsing now because the Ukrainians are being pushed back. Tell me, what is the mood in Donetsk and indeed in Gorlivka now? Are people becoming more confident? Do they feel that this war is coming to an end, that victory is in sight? Is there an improvement in civilian morale? Or are people just getting on with their lives, getting by in these still very difficult conditions?
Well, I asked people about what they thought about Trump being reelected and how that would affect the war. I both asked civilian refugees and actually Russian military snipers. And more or less, I got the same answers. They're hoping for peace. I mean, we're talking the civilians and the military. They're hoping for peace. And maybe to one person, peace means something else or how it could get there. But the fact is, everybody's tired of war, and they want this war to end. So they hope that Trump's going to do something to push the world in the right direction so people stop dying on both sides. Because, I mean, this war, it's one thing for all of Russia. It's going on the 3-year mark soon, but the civilians have done bust. This has been going on for 10 years. So something needs to happen to get this over with. And, Donetsk, right now there's 5 regions of what Russian law considers says is Russia territory that have Ukrainian soldiers on them. Regardless what side, people out there want, favor. The fact is Russian law says these 5 regions are part of Russia, and they need to do something to stop, to remove a foreign force from them. Now that, of course, includes the 4 territories in the war zone, the old war zone, Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, and Lugansk. But as we know, this also now includes Kursk, which actually Russia's been making a lot of headway in as well. When Ukraine first came across, it was reported that they had taken control of over 1,500 square kilometers, and that just surprise. I mean, nobody knew what to expect when that happened, but it's reported now that Russia has taken back well over half of that territory. So, yeah.
No, I've heard the same, that it's in fact that DS, the Ukrainian mapping project, they're saying that it's down to about a third of its original size. So I mean, it's been shrunk very considerably. Now, I believe you've been there. I think you've been to Kursk as well. You've seen the situation there. I mean, what is the fighting like? So I've heard some reports that say that the fighting in Kursk is even more intense than it is in Donbass. I mean, is that true, or are you, is it impossible for someone to say?
Well, yeah, I've been there on the front line. Actually, I went with Russian storm group, as they call it, or assault team, to document them taking taking territory back from Ukraine, attacking the Ukrainians. And I was there not so recently. It's been a while now, but weeks after the original incursion. And I documented the fighting. Yeah, very intense fighting. And just, I can't stress enough how much drone warfare has taken so much of a part of this war. It's such a psychological, has such a psychological impact on the soldiers, the civilians, the firefighters, the ambulances, and the journalists. I mean, it's just so intense when you're going to the front line, and at any moment, I mean, that can be it. I mean, that's when I go to the front line positions, I mean, that's the scariest part, really, is not being at the front line when shells can come down and all that stuff. It's in the car trying to get there. I mean, because you're so helpless, basically. But yeah, the fighting was very intense in Kursk. Every hour there were sirens in the city of Kursk going off, warning of drones and things like this. But yeah, I mean, it was a different kind of war. It is different. Of course, I'm sure it's changed a lot since I have been there, because it was a new region that literally just got jumped into the war. So I hope to be going back very, very soon, as soon as probably early next week, to spend another time there on the front and bring out another series of reports on how it's changed and what's happening. But yeah, it seems like more has changed as far as the war overall as far as the technical side of it in the last months than it has in the last years. Things are just changing so much. I mean, there's so many reports of the fiber optic drones now, where electronic warfare can't even affect them. Hopefully soon I'll be doing some reports directly on that. And fire-breathing dragon drones, thermite-carrying drones, just so much is going on now as far as the drone warfare and how it affects the war. I mean, it's definitely, as far as weapon to weapon, I think it's up there at the top.
Can one hear them? I read a report somewhere in fact, a British newspaper about the Russian drones, that they're like wasps, that you can hear them like wasps, and that but this is written quite a long time ago, but that in itself, the sound of the drones buzzing is deeply demoralizing to, in this case, the Ukrainian soldiers.
Well, I can tell you in my experiences with hearing these drones, there's basically three main types of drones that you have to worry about. You know, there's modifications to each one, but the main three is the kamikaze, the reconnaissance, and the DJI drones that can also be used for reconnaissance, but they're with the helicopter with the quadricopter basically that can be used for reconnaissance, but also to drop ammunition and target artillery or assist in the targeting. So basically, the ones that you're most afraid of when you hear them are the kamikaze or FPV drones, and those can resemble wasps, I guess you could say. And you're under the trees or you're somewhere and you just hear this bzz, and every time it turns, it changes the sound just a little bit, so you know it's right. I've been in this situation many times. It's right above you, and it just hunting you. Because, there's someone seeing a TV screen or a control screen on the other side that is looking to try to figure out what's a tree and what's you, so it can kill you, regardless if you're a journalist or soldier or whatever you are. Just last week we had a chief editor in a local gazette in Kursk who was killed by a Ukrainian kamikaze drone when it hit her civilian vehicle. It just happens every day. And it's also, you hear the helicopter DJI drones that might drop a bomb or something on you. Those are a little bit duller sounds. And as far as the long range reconnaissance can also target artillery, those are higher, and a lot of those are more like airplane style with wings. They actually, the nickname for them is wings. As far as a normal drone, the soldiers just call them birds. But when they're a big reconnaissance ones, they say, "Oh, there's wings above us." So yeah, it really firsthand experience. I could tell you these drones, especially the kamikazes, are just so psychologically affects your job, whatever job that's doing, whether you're trying to shoot, trying to film, trying to save someone's life or whatever. It's such a horrible feeling. And I'm not saying this, just off a whim, but we know there's been several journalists that have been killed by these Ukrainian kamikaze drones. So, this is, who's going to be the next one? It's not a matter of when the next journalist is going to be killed by a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. It's not a matter of if, but when and who. Unfortunately,
can I ask? Because you said earlier in the program that the Russians have now reached the border, or rather, they will soon reach the border of Donetsk region, and they'll be close to Dnipro or Dnipropetrovsk region. Has there been any discussion about whether they intend to cross it? There's a lot of discussion about this on alternative or independent media and social media, and there's also been a little bit of discussion about this in the mainstream media here in the West. That the Russians might be intending to move on towards the Dnieper River itself, towards Dnipro itself. Have you heard anything about that? Has anybody talked about this? What did the soldiers think?
Right now there's reports coming from some Ukrainian sources, reportedly, that Russia is preparing this huge offensive on the city of Dnipropetrovsk. Now, whether that, I just wrote an article on Substack about this yesterday, whether that is, how accurate that is, of course, they want to take that territory because they consider it part of Russia. But if they're going to do it right now, is this something that Ukraine is really warning of, or maybe they're trying to take the eyes off of something else and put it on that? Maybe this is a form of propaganda, a little bit of bait and switch. Who knows? Of course, Russia is definitely interested in taking back the one of the two biggest cities that Russian law considers part of Russia, Dnipropetrovsk, that is controlled by Ukrainian forces. The two biggest cities are Kherson and Zaporozhye. So definitely Russia is going to want to take them back. When that's going to happen, how they're going to go about it. Is it going to go about peacefully through negotiations, which I think everybody would rather. But the fact is, Russia law considers this part of Russia. Yeah. So the war's not stopping until Russia controls all of the territory that Russia law considers part of Russia. I'm not sure, who could give or rearrange the border of Russia legally. Yeah.
I don't think constitutionally, to answer your question, I don't think it can be done if you look at the Russian constitution. Can I just ask, what about this? I mean, there's lots of talk about freezing the conflict, ending the conflict here rather than there, coming to all sorts of agreements, letting Ukraine join NATO, that sort of thing. Putin is ruling all that out. What is, do people talk about things like that in Donbass? Do the soldiers talk about this sort of thing? And I mean, what do you think their reaction would be if a deal like that were ever done, which of course Putin is ruling out?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard talks here and there of people hearing this, and on paper it looks like, wow, this way people can stop dying, but it ain't gonna happen. I mean, no one really thinks that it's possible. One thing I heard was, okay, when Trump comes in, there might be some sort of a ceasefire, but it's not gonna last. I mean, it's just not. There might be a ceasefire. Okay, great. For a couple weeks, people somewhat stop dying. I mean, they're not gonna completely stop dying. They're still gonna be fighting, even like every ceasefire. But it's gonna give time for forces to recharge, re-equip themselves, and get started again. I mean, as far as I see, someone that's been in this territory, covering this situation for 10 years, and I think you might have the same idea, is there's no way peace is going to come until Russia controls these 5 territories.
Yeah, I agree with that. Lastly, and this is my very last question, and I come back to it, it's about the mood of the soldiers. I mean, you said some of them are weary of the war, but did you get any sense of a fall in their determination? Are they still determined to keep fighting until Russia achieves its objectives, or are they in the mood to quit, or are they exhilarated and confident because of the Russian advances? What is the mood of the soldiers that you've spoken to at the moment?
No, now they see a light at the end of the tunnel, and they're getting more empowered by the fact that it seems the war is getting actually closer to ending, and as they put it, victory is coming sooner than later.
Right. Are they intimidated by the Western missiles, the Storm Shadows and the attackers? I mean, there's been a huge amount of discussion about this, but I mean, is this something that has unnerved them at all?
I would actually, it's the more, the reaction more is, okay, so now they're going to piss off Putin, and then he's really going to let him have it. It's not so much they're afraid of the weapons coming this way. They have the idea of Ukraine should be afraid of what's going to be the answer.
Yeah. Okay, Patrick, actually, this is my very last question. We've had this attack with this Oreshnik missile on Yuzhmash in Dnipro. There's been an awful lot of discussion about what the effectiveness of that missile strike was. I've heard some reports that the entire factory has been destroyed. Others are saying that the damage was superficial. Have you any information on this, or has anybody spoken to you about this at all? And are you in any position to share anything? And I promise that is my last question.
Well, it is needed. Well, I would say, we definitely saw most of the damage to Ukraine or the West was psychological damage to see this weapon go right through any air defenses and, just breeze in like nothing. So as far as what happened on the ground with those, basically empty warheads, as far as I understand, because they're made to carry nukes and they're empty. I'm not a professional on the technical side of that, but they're designed to carry something that has a lot bigger of a boom. So I think the most of the damage came in psychological warfare. Just the West knowing, okay, Russia's got this. Russia has no problem using it. So let's think about our next moves a little bit harder.
Patrick, you've answered all my questions very thoroughly, and I can only say thank you. Alex, have you anything to ask to maybe just to say?
Where can people find you, Patrick? Where can people follow you?
Is like we said, my work has been going on covering this war and other wars for particularly this one, last 10 years. But I put most of my full reports with full English translations on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter as well. But right now I'm putting really my in-depth reports, both text and video and extra video and even early looks at a lot of my work on Substack. So if people want to really get the nit and gritty of what I do, go to Substack. I'm actually newer to the platform, but that's where most of my stuff is going to be going out. So we need to get on that, subscribe to my Substack, and got a lot more to come there than you'll just get just watching YouTube.
All right, I will have a link to Patrick's information in the description box down below, as well as a pinned comment. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us.
Patrick Lancaster, thank you very much. That's been an outstanding program, enormously informative. Thank you. Thank you for giving us your time as well.
Thank you.